close. Once again, I was involved in the closest matchup of all games in this fantasy league. And once again, I come out on the losing side. Now, as much as I would like to be upset, I can't really, because it's not like we both underperformed. Both our teams played brilliantly. He just happened to finish with the higher score. On a 135.9 projection this week, my team delivered 153.4 points. I cannot be mad at that level of production. That is more than enough, usually, but not in this week. I started Drake May at quarterback, opting to bench Bo Nix, and that proved to be a good decision, as Drake May went on to score 26.3 points on his 17.7 projection. My starting running back was Devon Achane with 26.2 points on an 18.7 point projection. So two guys in both excelled. Here's where we get our biggest bust of the week. In Omarion Hampton, my running back too, on a 15.7 point projection, he scores only 3.5 on Monday Night Football. I needed him to deliver, and he did anything but that. He disappointed very hard, and I lose pretty much solely because of him, but it's okay. Next up, I had Puka Nacua as my wide receiver 1. He scored 27.6 on a 19.7 point projection. After that, Terry McLaurin at my wide receiver 2, and he underperformed, only scoring 9.8 on a 14 point projection, but overall a much better outing than in week 1. In my tight end position, I started off the week with a bang with Tucker Kraft scoring 24.4 on his 9.8 projection, which was, it gave me a big confidence boost, but it wasn't enough. It wasn't quite enough. At my flex, I started Calvin Ridley in the flex 1, who scored 8.7 on a 13.5 projection. Once again, he underperformed like Terry McLaurin, but it wasn't at the rate of underperformance in week 1, still improved. In my second flex spot, I had Emeka Egbuka making the start, and he scored 12.9 on a 14 point projection, and I'm not mad at that either. Toward the end of that game, there was one more, great catch he could have made. The ball was right in his hands, and he just couldn't come down with it. And with that, he would have gone over. So I'm not too terribly upset at this level of performance. Now, with the Bengals defense, they scored 2 points on a 4.4 point projection, and that, I will say, wasn't what I was expecting. I think that overall, Trevor Lawrence made as many mistakes as I was predicting. He threw 2 picks. Jaguars on offense weren't that great. Well, they scored a lot of points, but I think really what changed it in this game for me was the fact that Jake Browning checked into the game. With Jake Browning taking snaps for the Bengals, they threw 3 turnovers, which kept giving the Jaguars short fields and scoring opportunities, and they were able to rack up a lot more time of possession and yardage than they ideally would have been able to. So I think that kind of messed it up. But overall, yeah, it wasn't too far from the projected value. It could have been worse. And finally, I had Chris Boswell, who scored 12 points on an 8.2 projection. So all in all, they did very well. On my bench, you see that I have DeAndre Swift, 13.9 on a 14.1 projection. Had I played him instead of Omarion Hampton, I would have been able to pull through this week. But I didn't really, I don't know, I was hoping to see better from Hampton in week 2. Week 1, it was a light workload, but against a good defense. And I thought that it would be a bit easier for him in week 2, and I was wrong. Then we had Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, who I'm very glad I did not start. He had 1.7 points on an 8.4 projection. Deebo Samuel going off in back-to-back games. I could have put him in the flex. But Calvin Ridley week 1 had a 30% target share. Didn't want to bench him. Emeka Egbuka went off in week 1. And I think between Terry that the connection would be there. And once again, I was wrong. So maybe that's a bad on me, but it is what it is. Bonix, good on the bench. Zach Charbonnet, good on the bench. Jaden Akins, Hunter Henry. Also, I felt like the start ends it overall. I'm not too mad at the way that I organized my roster. Just Hampton really disappointed. Now, Ashton Bowers, on the other hand, he also had a phenomenal week, scoring 156.14 points on a 134.9 projection. Overall, we were only supposed to have a 1-point difference. We finished 3 points apart. That's fantasy. He had Dak Prescott, who scored 22 on a 16.8 projection. Ashton Genty, who also disappointed, only scoring 7.4 on a 17.3 projection. But that was still much more than Omarion Hampton, which was really the difference. Both guys were essentially going head-to-head in that last matchup, and Genty got the better of Hampton. Then he had James Cook, who scored 26.5 on 15.4. And the difference maker in this matchup, Amon-Ra St. Brown, 39.2 fantasy points in week 2. Because the Lions were running up the score, he scores 3 touchdowns. And it's just one less touchdown, and maybe I would have survived. But now 3 touchdown performance from Amon-Ra with the hat trick. Then he had Devontae Adams and his wide receiver 2, who had his breakout game as a Rams player. Mark Andrews horribly underperformed, only had 1 catch for 4 yards, so that was not as ideal for Ashton Bowers. DK slightly underperforming, 11 points on 14.7 projection, and Zay Flowers with 14.9 on 14.1 projection, down from his yardage in overall fantasy in week 1, but still really good. Then he had San Francisco defense, who scored 5 on a 7-point projection, and Harrison Butker, who scored 6 on an 8.3 projection. On his bench, he had Isaiah Pacheco, Stephon Diggs, Michael Pittman, Rashid Shaheed, Nick Chubb, Lions defense, and Brian Robinson Jr. So, had he played Lions defense, he could have gotten 3 more. Had he played, let's say he went, we're going for like a realistic start sit. I don't know that it would have made sense for him to start anyone else. Like, who in the right mind would have started Nick Chubb or Rashid Shaheed over DK Metcalf? So if we rule that out and we rule out benching Ashton Genty, realistically he could have gone for 159, which is a lot. That's a boatload of points. We can't say realistically I would have gone any other way, because this is what I had. But had I made some more wise decisions, I could have ended up with a win here. So, in summation, I moved to 0-2. I am tied for 8th. There's 3 of us that are 0-2 in this league. The rest are either 1-1 or 2-0. And overall, I can't say I'm too upset. Across 2 weeks, I am currently number 2 in points scored in the entire league, which is crazy because I've lost both games. But I'm not mad. I think that the team that I've formed is quite good. I'm excited for what is to come. I think as we continue to progress, I will start picking up the wins. I've just gotten really good matchups in the first 2 weeks, and you just have to take it on the chin. I will say, however, in one of the other leagues that I'm in, the one with the Santa Barbara locals, I am quite upset at my loss in that one. I lost by 0.2 points in that league. And in that game, I was playing Omarion Hampton in the Monday night game, and had Omarion Hampton had the fumble counted towards him, I would have won that matchup. But instead, they decided to change it and credit the Omarion Hampton fumble to Justin Herbert, and so I lost by 0.2. At this point, I would have preferred that they credited it to Omarion Hampton, because yes, I would have lost by a little more in this league, but that other league also has a $15 buy-in, and I at least would have won there. But instead, I get the worst of both worlds. Lose by 3 points in this league, lose by 0.2 in that league. But once again, not too upset, because in that league I'm also number 2 in points scored. So even though I'm 1-1, I'm second place in a team of 10, in a league of 10. So yeah, good drafting, just bad matchups. It is what it is. So with that, let us move into our Week 3 Waiver Wire segment. I've got 3 players at each skill position for you this week. And I'm just realizing now I forgot defense, so we'll do a quick analysis at the end to gauge that. So let's start off with quarterbacks. First quarterback off the table has to be Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones currently is the number 2 quarterback in all of fantasy, but he's still only owned in 21% of leagues. Across his first 2 starts, he has at least 1 rushing touchdown and 1 passing touchdown. And he did everything that he did last week against a Denver Broncos defense that is very good. If he is able to be a viable fantasy option against the Denver Broncos, I'm willing to trust Daniel Jones going forward as my quarterback 1. I mean, I already have one, so I don't need it. But for those of you that had Joe Burrow go down or are not too fond of how your starter is playing thus far, Daniel Jones, until something changes, has the green light from me. Next up, we've got Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers currently is owned in 20.3% of leagues, and he had a great week 1, but definitely a subpar week 2. Went from over 20 points to just above 10 points. But the reason why I'm targeting Aaron Rodgers as a streaming option in week 3 is because he plays the New England Patriots. And while I am a New England Patriots fan, it is undeniable that we have made the opposing quarterbacks look pretty good. Both Geno Smith and Tua Tagovailoa have been able to amass over 300 yards passing on our secondary, and both of them scored over 20 points against the Patriots in their matchups. So I think that Aaron Rodgers will have a good matchup to exploit and get back to his week 1 type performance. And finally, our third quarterback that I'm suggesting for this week is Mac Jones. Mac Jones is currently only owned in 1.4% of leagues. He is a backup that is filling in for the injured Brock Purdy. He's coming off a day in which he threw 3 touchdown passes against the Saints. And in week 3, he gets to play an Arizona Cardinals defense that just gave up 300 yards passing and 3 touchdowns through the air to Bryce Young. So, Kyle Shanahan has Mac Jones looking pretty solid in the Shanahan system. I think that is a viable streaming option if you're in a deeper league and need a QB. Next up, we move into running backs. The first running back that I will suggest to you is Najee Harris. Najee Harris is currently owned in about 40% of leagues, and this has less to do with Najee and more to do with Omarion Hampton. Omarion Hampton across 2 weeks has not looked good. He has not been productive, gotten quite a bit of touches, seen the bulk of the snaps, but disappointed in back-to-back weeks, and his fumble at the end of week 2 might leave a sour taste in the mouth. Najee Harris, on the other hand, I think that he has seen his role get progressively larger. Obviously, we're only in week 2, but he went from 2 touches in week 1 to 10 touches in week 2, and we could see that grow even bigger and cut further into Omarion Hampton's lead back role. So I'm going with Najee off the waiver wire. Next up, another backup that could see more work now is Bashal Tutin. He's owned in 40% of leagues as well, and he is the primary benefactor of Tank Bigsby getting shipped off to the Eagles. With Bigsby out of the picture, we saw Tutin handle a lot more touches. In week 1, he just had 3 touches, but that jumped up to 10 in week 2, and he was able to make the most of these touches, scoring 15 points on this expanded workload. So if we know that Bashal Tutin is seeing double-digit touches going forward. He's definitely worth a stash, and he could see a lot of work if Travis Etienne were to go down. And finally, we have, once again, our third running back of this week, Kenneth Gainwell. Kenneth Gainwell currently only owned in 10% of leagues. I don't know if he has the most standalone value, but when draft time was occurring, everyone was targeting Caleb Johnson, myself included, and after this week's performance, Caleb Johnson is a drop candidate, absolutely. I don't think that he has any value until further notice. He just had one of the biggest blunders that we'll see on special teams, and offensively is not being utilized at all, so Caleb Johnson is off the board. Kenneth Gainwell has established himself as the clear running back 2 in the Steelers' offense. He hasn't been uber productive yet, but it is worth noting that his 9 targets across 2 weeks is more than some great pass-catching backs in the league, like Alvin Kamara, who has only seen 8. So, a third down back that could have a week where he pops off, but really I'm more just viewing him as a handcuff if Jalen Warren were to go down. Anywho, after that, we move into our wide receiver trio, and the first wide receiver that I'm going to suggest to you this week is none other than Wan'Dale Robinson. Wan'Dale Robinson owned in 30% of leagues at the moment. We should all be familiar with his game after last season. He is a PPR demon, doesn't get very many yards at all, but commands quite a few targets and hauls in lots of passes. He saw 8 targets in week 1, and we saw that grow to double digits to 10 targets in week 2. Right now, as it stands, if you're in a PPR league, Wan'Dale Robinson is the wide receiver 9, and he once again has over 20% target share, which is what you look for in a wide receiver. He is one of the few guys that is not owned in over 50% of leagues that is hitting that mark. So definitely go grab him if he's available. Number 2, we have Hunter Renfrow. Hunter Renfrow only owned in 2% of leagues at the moment. He's coming off a game in which he saw 9 targets, 7 catches for 48 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And the thing that we like to see with Hunter Renfrow is those 5 red zone targets across 2 weeks. That is tied for second most in the entire NFL, tied with Devontae Adams, and only second to Amon-Ra St. Brown. And finally, our third wide receiver for the week is Alik Ayomanour. He is owned in 8% of leagues at the moment, and he is quickly establishing himself as the wide receiver 2 on this Titans offense. This week, he was able to score 15.6 points in PPR formats, and he has a 23.2% target share, which is sliding slightly below Calvin Ridley. Calvin Ridley opened up the year at a 30% on that Titans offense, and after 2 weeks, he has calmed down to 25%, which is still elite. But Ayomanour being at 23.2, he is definitely a good wide receiver 2 on that Titans offense. After that, we move into our tight ends. And our number 1 tight end this week is going to be the same as last week, owned in just 48% of leagues, or still less than 50%. We have Juwan Johnson. If you don't have Juwan Johnson now, go grab him before it's too late. He is right now the number 2 tight end in all of fantasy. He's number 1 in targets across 2 weeks, number 2 in red zone targets, and number 2 in target share at 26.7%. The only tight end that has a higher target share than him is Trey McBride at 29.3%. You have to be all over him. I know he's not the sexiest of fakes, but the stats do not lie. Juwan Johnson is that guy on no further notice. Next up, we have kind of cheating the system here. We've got Zach Ertz, and now Zach Ertz is owned in exactly 50% of leagues at the moment, so I didn't know if I should include him, but I'm going to go ahead and just put him out there since technically he is available in half of the leagues. Right now he is the tight end 3 in fantasy, and he is tied for the 4th most receptions among all tight ends at 13. so far this year. And in week 1 and in week 2, he hasn't been able to score a touchdown, so we know that he is a preferred target for Jaden Daniels. And they should be having a better week than they did last week. I mean, last week, Zach Ertz still was a very productive, but the Commanders' offense as a whole was down. And I think that they have much better days ahead of them. And finally, our third and final tight end for the week is going to be Harold Fannin Jr. of the Cleveland Browns. Harold Fannin Jr. is currently owned in 28% of leagues, and he is third. He stands alone at third most in targets across 2 weeks with 14. He's currently 6th in receiving yards across 2 weeks, and he's the overall tight end 8. Yes, obviously on this offense we do have David Njoku, but Fannin is holding his own decently. He has a 16.8% target share, not quite as elite as some of the wide receivers we'll see on this list, but tight ends having over 20% is a little more rare. So if you can go out and get Juwan Johnson, I would highly recommend it. But if Ertz and Juwan Johnson are not on the table, then Fannin is a solid option as well. So with all of our skill position players out of the way, let's go look at those defenses. And I have to say, so far, I've been kind of iffy on my defensive picks. The Rams suggestion was a pretty good one from last week. I don't recall. I think I said 49ers. And the 49ers ended up with 5 points, so that one was also okay. But the Bengals, they only scored 2. So let's see what else we can do. In terms of defensive matchups this week, we've got all rostered percent, and we've got to go below 50% owned. Alright, so, okay, well, owned in 45% of leagues right now, you have the Packers defense. And I don't need to say that much about it. The Packers defense has been magnificent thus far, playing against two very high-powered offenses. And the Lions and the Commanders, they've completely neutralized both of them. And this week they get to play against the Cleveland Browns, so they are the number 1 option on the board. After that, let's see. I think dysfunctional offense. Who do I think? Yes, the Carolina Panthers. How did the Cardinals end up finishing last week? I know they gave up a lot towards the end. Because of, I guess, their scoop score. They had 3 sacks, a fumble recovery, an interception, and a touchdown. So, yeah, they allowed 22 points, but they still finished with 12 fantasy points. I would say you can go ahead and pick up that Falcons defense. Right now, they are coming off a 21-point game against the Vikings. Yeah, in week 2, they allowed 6 points only to this Vikings offense. 2 interceptions, 2 fumble recoveries, 6 sacks, all totaling for 21 fantasy points. And they get to play a Carolina Panthers team that doesn't really know how to play offense. So, yes, they did have 300 yards and all that, but they still make a lot of mistakes. So I would say hunting the Falcons defense here is a very good play. And our third defensive option. It might actually be the Colts. Yeah, the Colts, they didn't have a great performance last week. They had 1 interception, but they allowed 28 points, finished with just 1 fantasy point. But in week 1, they had 2 interceptions, a fumble recovery, 3 sacks, only allowed 8 points for a total of 14 points scored in fantasy. And in week 3, they get to play to see some defense or some team do better against the Titans. We're going to see the Titans do better against some defense. They're going to win a game at some point. But I think the Colts have been rolling. I have a feeling that the Colts defense will do just fine against CJ Ward and company. Yeah. And that about does it for our Week 3 waiver wire pickups. So once again, we've got Daniel Jones, Aaron Rodgers, Mac Jones, Kenneth Gainwell, Najee Harris, Bishop Tootin, Wandale Robinson, Hunter Renfro, Malik Almanor, Juwan Johnson, Harold Fannin Jr., Zach Ertz, Colts defense, Falcons defense, and the Packers defense. As always, thank you for watching. If you enjoy content like this, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. All the best to all of you in your Week 3 fantasy football matchups, and please wish me luck because I am going to need it. So yeah, thanks for watching. I will see you